Shares of Tesla, one of the best performers of the morning, soaring today following the president-elect's victory last night. Joining us to talk about what it means for Tesla, for big tech, for Elon Musk, let's bring in Dan Ives, Wedbush Securities analyst, of course, a buy rating on Tesla, and a recent target at least of 300. Dan, good morning. Yep. Does that change, that number?
Look, I mean, I think it's a strategic bet that Musk made that ultimately could pay dividends for Tesla in a huge way for the coming years. I think $40 to $50 per share it adds just for beginners, not just because of what could happen from a tax credit perspective. I think leveling playing field, you take out the Detroit automakers, and then that's really going to give them an advantage from a cost, scale, and scope perspective. But I think the big thing here, Trump could ultimately fast-track autonomous FSD. And our whole view, as we've talked about in the show, $1 trillion of valuation just on AI alone. This is going to unlock it. That's a key.
Makes a lot of sense. Is there no scenario in which relations with China take a big hit and Musk is asked to pick a side, as in a sense?
Yeah, and I think that, so on the other side especially, it's not just for Tesla, also Apple as well. For Musk, I think there's a comfort in him being in this situation that he could almost be a pseudo sort of, ambassador,
shadow diplomacy?
Call it 10% politician, 90% CEO, in terms of making sure that the retaliatory or the carve-out, I think that's going to be important. The carve-out piece from a tariff perspective, and I think one of the reasons that you see Nvidia up today, you see semi, you look at Apple, despite some fears about what we're going to see on tariffs, there's a view maybe with Musk there, Bark could be a little worse than the bite when it comes to tariffs, specifically on AI. And I think that's really, right now, what's key, not just to AI, but to the broader tech sector.
You started off by saying you think this could materially help Tesla, having him in the White House. How? What sort of regulations are we watching?
So I think there's three things. One is that the EV tax credits get taken away. And I think that, even though negative for EV sector, bullish for Tesla because of their scale and scope. So from a price perspective.
Bad for Detroit, though, potentially.
Bad for Detroit. Bad for GM, bad for Ford.
Which you cover as well.
Which and my view going into this was like that was a potential risk, but I think Mary and the team have kind of pulled back a little, so it's not like they've bet it all on EVs. So I think one is going to be that where they get an advantage. Two, and I think probably most important, is this autonomous FSD. Because when you think about cybercab and everything we've talked about, 26, could that be 25? Now, all of a sudden, if Trump clears the path there, this changes the whole paradigm, I think, for
Are those
for
regulatory authorities that oversee full self-driving federal in nature so that that's where it is? It's not states that are involved? Or how does that work?
Is it Department of Transportation?
It's a great question. I mean, there's some state, but a lot of it's federal. And then I think the third part is a big overhang here. I think just broader has been regulatory. I think another overhang has even been like FTC with Khan. In terms of not just for Tesla, but I think broader in big tech. I think the view of many investors I've talked to is Khan's likely out, in this scenario with Trump taking over, which is bullish for M&A, bullish for big tech, less regulation.
Right.
But when it's specifically when it comes to Tesla, it's all about Musk now having a say where he didn't have one either Biden.
No, he's got a significant say. Let's talk very briefly here. Broader tech, generative AI, which we talk to you about a lot when we bring you on about Nvidia. What do you think his impact will be there in terms of advising the administration, I guess, and what the policy may be?
He'll be what I'll call like an AI ambassador. I mean, that's essentially what the role he could play from a tech perspective. There's comfort. I think it's part of why Nvidia's up, why Apple's not down, despite some worries about retaliatory. Musk being there is Twilight Zone as it sounds. Actually gives some comfort that specifically on the AI piece that he could actually make sure that this does not have unintended consequences for the big tech trade, for Microsoft, for the hyperscalers. And I think that's something that's clearly at play here, especially with Musk having much bigger say in the White House.
Finally, when you think about state governments, right, Democratic states that might be recoiling at what happened at the federal level, does that not make them more antagonistic on FSD at least?
Oh, no, I mean, like, this is going to be, you'll have battles that will continue to play on, for the coming years. But the big one is on the federal side. So especially what's going on in China, if Trump really tries to fast track autonomous FSD, then everything we talked about at robotaxi today, instead of 3-4 years, that's 1-2 years ahead. And I think most of the investors I'm talking to, that's their big focus. Can this fast track autonomous? I think the question is probably yes, and that's why we start to look at $1 trillion, $1.5 trillion market cap as this all plays out. It's a big part of the value.
Now, $19 away from your target. Keep us updated.
Yeah, I will.
Good to see you.
Great.
Dan Ives.
Last week, the stock market witnessed an electrifying twist that left both investors and financial analysts buzzing with excitement and speculation. News of Tesla's dramatic 8% surge in share price spread like wildfire, marking the company's return to the prestigious trillion-dollar club of tech giants. This surge was primarily attributed to a whirlwind of political change. Donald Trump's unexpected return to the White House. The mere announcement injected a wave of optimism among investors who are eagerly anticipating favorable conditions for companies like Tesla under Trump's leadership. Elon Musk, the enigmatic CEO of Tesla, known for his dynamic and often unpredictable business strategies, has openly backed Trump's campaign, a move that has many pondering its potential implications on Tesla's market trajectory. The alliance between Musk, a maverick entrepreneur, and Trump, a polarizing political figure, creates a unique intersection of business interests and political ideologies. The events have left the financial community to ponder how this evolving relationship might influence not just Tesla, but the broader landscape of the tech market. Analysts such as Dan Ives of Wedbush Securities and Dan Levy of Barclays have chimed in, offering insights into how this political business synergy could redefine market dynamics. Still, critical questions loom. Why is the stock market so optimistic about this political shift for Tesla? And what does the future hold for Musk's rapidly evolving electric vehicle empire? Welcome back, everyone, to Investocracy.
I want to ask you about Elon Musk, and if you'll allow me, let me just put it this way, because the market tried to make sense of the Tesla move. It's believed that Trump will repeal some or all of what's legislated for on the EV consumer incentive side, manufacturing support for the companies themselves. There's the association tailwind between Musk and Trump. Why is it that Tesla survives and stands out to your mind, but GM, Ford, Rivian, names like that won't do as well?
Sure. I think it's a great point. Let's go two parts. One, by removing the credits, the 7,500, that's going to give a much more even playing field. I mean, Tesla has a scale and scope. They're going to be hugely advantaged there versus the Detroit stalwarts. So that's bullish there in terms of giving them that availability and I think option, to ultimately they could still cut prices more. But the big thing, the reason that this stock, I believe it's $1 trillion of value unlocked when it comes to the AI piece, because when you look at Trump now, this is going to give the highway, the Autobahn, for autonomous. I think he is going to fast track autonomous FSD. That is very bullish for Tesla. And it comes down to, from Musk, one of the best strategic bets he ever made was ultimately this bet on Trump.
Is the technology ready?
I think the technology is not necessarily ready today in its current form, but it's going to a point that this is ultimately going to be, when I look at autonomous and FSD, it's $1 trillion incremental valuation. You look at cyber cabs, you could ultimately see 2026, 2027 initiatives get fast-tracked. Tesla, Musk, is the big winner in this, call it Trump sweepstakes, along with big tech. Because the other view is that Khan is likely going to be out at the FTC, and that's bullish for deal-making across big tech.
Okay, there's a lot to be bullish about, but one area of concern has been, well, yes, AI will be fueled, but what about the infrastructure for AI? A lot of that comes with growing chip sector here in the United States, and that's dependent on, well, in many ways, the CHIPS Act.
Yeah.
Maybe that gets blown out the water. Yeah,
so I think when it comes to CHIPS Act or Inflation Reduction Act, clearly there's going to be a lot of revisions there. I think probably the biggest loser and negative would be names like Intel, just adding to that pain. But from a chip perspective...
You think Intel will be a loser there?
Well, first, I think Intel's been a loser. This is just adding gasoline to the fire in terms of IRA was really going to be a huge opportunity for Intel. I think Intel now is on the wrong side of that trend. I think what you're going to see with IRA and Inflation Reduction Act, much more focus on chips in the U.S., but really much more focus on the AI build-out. And I think when it comes to some of the tariffs that we talk about with China, I think there will be carve-outs That's why I don't think that Nvidia is going to be so negatively impacted. I don't think a lot of these other names in terms of the tariffs, I think Tesla, Apple, that's also why it's so important that Musk is going to be a whisper in the White House.
I'm just going to let you put your IFB back on because I know Ed wants to jump in here. But I'm interested in, basically you think Trump isn't going to live up to a lot of the things he promised on the campaign? I
think Barr's going to be a lot worse than the bite when it comes to some of the tariffs. You'll have some that will be much more nastier. But when it comes to some of the exports that we see, I think you're going to see carve-outs here. I don't think it's going to be as negative for tech and supply chain. That's why right now this is a Goldilocks scenario for tech, but it's a champagne moment for Tesla investors.
Dan, you can hear me well?
Can you hear him?
I'll give you a second. All good. All right, Here's the question. Be honest with me. Can Elon Musk have an informal or formal role in the administration and be the CEO of Tesla, SpaceX, associated with Neuralink, Boring Company, etc.?
Yes. I think he won't clearly have a formal role from a cabinet perspective.
Why not clearly?
Because then it complicates in terms of his ownership and I think some of the structure in terms of what we see with Tesla, with SpaceX. But I believe he'll be an unofficial whisper. I think he'll have a significant influence within the White House. And that's why this is going to be known as probably the best strategic bet that Musk ever made in terms of betting on Trump. And I think, this is something that is just starting to play out in terms of this Trump-Musk sort of alliance.
The announcement of Trump's victory and its subsequent effect on Tesla's stock price quickly became the focal point of discussions across financial forums and investor meetings. This surge is a reflection, perhaps, of Elon Musk's strategic acumen and his knack for aligning Tesla with the prevailing political winds. His robust financial support for Trump's campaign appears not just as a personal endorsement, but as a calculated business decision. During Trump's prior term, Tesla saw an unprecedented 987% increase in stock value, a period marked by friendly regulatory environments and economic policies that benefited its operations. Under the succeeding administration of President Biden, while Tesla's growth remained commendable at 86.5%, the lack of the previous exponential rise further highlighted the unique advantages the company experienced during Trump's presidency. Investors anticipate that a Trump administration could provide regulatory leniency, particularly concerning Tesla's forward-thinking projects like autonomous vehicle deployment, potentially easing the path for innovation and expansion. But before we go any further, if you want to keep up with Tesla's latest updates and keep up with the stock market's latest news, you can follow our Twitter account. We post multiple times daily about the biggest changes and catalysts in the market, so click the follow button if you don't want to miss the newest market updates.
Tesla, shares soaring on the back of Trump's presidential victory. GM and Ford also getting a boost. Tom Naran of RBC writing, we find the positive moves from US auto names puzzling, especially considering how they reacted to tariff threats during the first Trump administration back in 18 and 19. Most puzzling to us is the positive reaction to Tesla shares. Tom's with us around the table. Tom, good morning.
Good morning.
What puzzled you about Tesla? What didn't make sense?
Well, it's just we don't have evidence that we're going to get national, federal deregulation of AI. Tariffs is not a good thing for Tesla. And any repeal or attempted repeal of the IRA would really be bad for Tesla. So other than the fact that the CEO has a relationship with the president-elect, I don't really see why it would benefit shares of Tesla.
Do you have any confidence that he could stop those bad things from happening to the company?
I mean, we saw the first go around, 2018, 2019. I mean, it was more of a threat, so it didn't really happen. So that could be a silver lining. Like, is this just a bluff? I don't know. I don't know what's inside the hearts of these individuals.
Well, I mean, what about dark matter? Don't you understand? I mean, I guess this is sort of the question that we were just hearing about, which is like, how do you put some sort of price tag on a relationship that seems incredibly interconnected and where there is one person who clearly has an ear into Donald Trump?
Okay, so here's where I would probably agree is, remember, like, autonomy is like 70% of my Tesla valuation, right?
Yep.
Robotaxi, FSD. If there is federal deregulation, that would be tremendous for Tesla. Not just Tesla, a lot of companies doing autonomy. So if that happens, sure, we just don't have evidence of it. The only commentary we've heard has been in Trump rallies saying the opposite.
But Tom, we have a little bit of evidence, right? Trump 1.0, Tim Cook was dealing with some issues with Apple, called the president kind of, I think, leaning on his ego a little bit, and then said, can I come in and talk to you about it? And then Trump had a much better relationship with Tim Cook. Couldn't Elon Musk maybe get carve-outs for tariffs, but then also get deregulation on the back end? Because of his relationship and given how Trump likes to run his White House, he's in a prime position.
Well, the optics of how do you single out one automaker versus another,
Biden administration did it. They had GM over and didn't have Tesla when they had this whole EV announcement.
Yeah, but that was more of optics, right? Because of the UAW situation. That wasn't an actual policy. I think it'd be very difficult to give preferential treatment to one OEM and not the others. We saw clean tech get destroyed. Shares of clean tech stocks got destroyed. The same beneficiaries as Tesla, energy storage, EV credits, et cetera, making batteries. How do you benefit one company and not the others? The only way I see it is if it's a rising tide lifts all boats. If he was able to convince President-elect to change policy altogether, but I don't see that's what's happening.
Analysts like Dan Ives suggest that Tesla's significant market advantage in the EV sector is ripe for further capitalizing on this potential regulatory-friendly atmosphere. It's intriguing to witness Musk's fluid political affiliations. They seem less about ideology and more about strategic positioning, ensuring Tesla's preeminence in the market. As Dan Levy puts it, Tesla is somewhat reverting to its earlier meme stock tendencies, where speculative enthusiasm could weigh more heavily than fundamental analysis in driving its market performance. But before going any further, if you made it this far into the video, thank you. These videos take a lot of effort and time to make, so if you enjoyed them, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. This goes a long way in helping us grow. That said, back to the video.
Although we did see shares gain in Ford and GM, you said it was a little bit confusing, and it was even more confusing to see Tesla shares rising as much as they did. There is a larger question about de-emphasizing some of the shift in terms of composition of autos that they make, and that could potentially really benefit their business models, especially if the transition has been sort of forced upon them a little bit too quickly. Do you buy that? Do you think that enough could justify some of the rally?
I don't think so. I think if you look at the investment, GM is actually the biggest battery maker in the U.S., right? More than Tesla. And Ford's talked openly about how, look, if they were to change their pivot the situation now away from BEVs, what if the next administration comes in and is more restrictive and it makes you sell EVs more? Like they've already gone down this path. And again, all you have to do is look at what happened in 2018, 2019. Threats of tariffs were problematic, not just to the OEMs, but the supplier base. They're very broad based on their exposures. And also, I understand the competitive argument, right? Fine, maybe there's less Mercedes or BMWs, but the person buying a Chevy Silverado pickup truck, it's not like, and he's going to be like, well, I was going to get an E-Class, but now I'm going to get a Silverado. They don't really compete against each other,
I'd rather have the Silverado anyway, for what it's worth. For what it's worth. I got a message a moment ago as you were talking about autonomous driving. And this individual, Bloomberg subscriber, said, regulation isn't the problem with full self-driving, it's getting it to work. What is the biggest problem, regulation or getting it to work? And do you need looser regulation to achieve the other?
Well, there's a difference between full self-driving and then robotaxi. On FSD, regulation is important, I would argue, to incent people to purchase the product, right? Everyone thinks they're a good driver. It's hard to sell safety. But if it's mandated, like airbags and seatbelts, right, saves lives, that, I think, would be important to push it over, absolutely. But that's like a state-by-state issue. I mean, a federal law to mandate a level 2 plus, I don't know if I see that happening with a new administration.
As we navigate these uncharted waters, the conversation around Tesla is loaded with implications not only for its stock valuation, but also for the intersection of business strategies and geopolitical landscapes. Currently, Tesla's valuation is at a remarkable multiple of its forward earnings, leading to inevitable comparisons with other high-flying tech companies such as Nvidia. Both companies witnessed spectacular stock performances under different presidential administrations, adding layers to the competitive and strategic dimensions in the tech space. Despite this, following Trump's victory, a renewed sense of optimism takes hold, projecting a conducive environment for Tesla's future pursuits, particularly in controversial areas like self-driving technology. Forecasts might predict a 23% drop in potential earnings for the year, yet some investors view this as merely a transient dip in what remains a long-term vision aimed at relentless innovation and tackling market challenges. The narrative surrounding Tesla encapsulates the dream premium, valuations that hinge as much on visionary potential as on current financial statements. This conundrum leaves market participants debating whether Tesla is at a juncture for buying, holding, or planning a strategic exit. As the tale unfolds, a spectrum of opinions from expert analysts, seasoned investors, and even casual observers will undoubtedly shape the narrative going forward for one of the stock market's most scrutinized players. What's your take on Tesla's trajectory amidst these converging political and economic shifts? The company remains a captivating topic in financial discourse, enticing stakeholders with its blend of risk and reward. And finally, if you would like to know what companies like Tesla have been up to these past few days, go ahead and click on the next video on your screen. See you there.